Okay, so welcome to my live stream. Okay, so I have a slight delay because I'm monitoring the audio right now. So I have no idea if what I'm transmitting here actually works. So this is going to be an experiment for everybody. The fun part is the Windows 11 audio basically features are abysmal. It's awful. And for example, the microphone adjustment leveling, by default, Microsoft likes to auto adjust your microphone sensitivity. However, it gives you the option to turn that off because maybe you have a microphone that has a very particular gain setting it needs to be at. The problem is if you turn that off because you aforementioned have a particular gain setting in mind, Windows will be like, screw that. You get the gain setting we choose for you. And even though you uncheck the box that says we can control your gain, it does it anyway. So very, very annoying. Okay, anyway. Let's see. So today's little experiment here, let's minimize that. Sorry, I'm monitoring things on OBS in the on my laptop right here, which is kind of hidden by the modular setup. Okay, but let's get into the itself. So it's not going to be like a meandering stream. I have a goal in mind. So right here is half of my Eurorack setup. Okay, so you can see there are various modules here, which the ones that are relevant for today, I'll go over. Right now it has a simple patch. So you can hear this kind of like pseudo guitar kind of sound coming out of my keyboard here. And that is due to this module right here, which is called Rings. It's one of Mutable Instruments' most famous modules, and it's very common to find in Eurorack. Lots of people own Rings because it sounds great. So I'm doing today the most cliche thing you can do in modular. I am feeding Rings into a module called Clouds. Now, my version of Clouds here is this black module, and it is a clone. So this one's called Monsoon, which is a slightly alternative version of the original Clouds. So all of the software and how this thing works is, or the firmware, sorry, is the same as the original, I believe. Actually, I think I'm running the Parasite alternate version, but for the purposes of today, this is Clouds. So it does everything Clouds does. Right now, here's the raw Rings. I'm not affecting the audio in any way. Okay, that's raw audio. Let's add a little bit of reverb. Let's add a bunch. Okay, so again, the reason this is cliche is what lots of people do is they say, oh, well, Ring sounds great. Let's feed it into Clouds and just add some reverb. And that's what a lot of folks do. They use Clouds as just effectively an end of signal effects. So this is kind of like adding a reverb, pedal to your guitar. Now, we're going to do a little bit more interesting things with this today, but this is like I just want something that sounds, serviceable, but nothing fancy. Okay, let's turn that reverb down because I want to talk about the signal chain. All right. and by the way, my beads is right here. So at some point in this stream, we're going to pop this boy open. Okay, we're going to unbox this guy because I haven't opened this yet. And we're going to install the module. And I'm actually going to stick it right here next to clouds. And so the thing about beads is basically the big brother to clouds. In Eurorack, it's pretty rare to have a replacement. Like, generally speaking, there's not really upgrades. It's not like the next year model kind of thing comes out like for a car or a computer. Lots of folks run very old modules because, generally speaking, people are like, to put it another way, this module right here is a VCA. While in the future, they will make other VCAs in different companies, generally speaking, this is a utility tool that doesn't need to change. So IntelliGel, which manufactures this VCA, probably will never seriously change this module. So it's not like we need to buy one every year. These are already expensive enough. But sometimes a company will rework one of their products. And so in this case, Beads is a rework of Clouds because the original creator, she was never quite happy with how Clouds turned out. And so her last module that she designed is sort of my understanding at least, is how the Clouds she wished she made. So this is one of those rare moments where we can directly compare two modules where we have kind of the original raw version and a much more refined version. And I'm not going to look at the manual. I'm going to spend a lot of time with the manual, but for today, this is first impressions. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to open this box up and we're going to find out what happens. But before I do that, I want to talk about my simple patch here. I have a very simple patch. I got my Keystep 37 by Arcturia, which is sitting right here. And can't really move the camera, but if you notice, these three cords right here, these are heading into my Keystep. And what's coming out is the pitch information. It says, hey, what note to play. The gate that says, hey, I pressed the key. And some modulation, which I get to change a setting, like I'm wiggling a knob. If you're familiar with Eurorack, then I apologize if this is kind of like basic stuff. But this is my first stream, so I'm going to talk about basic stuff because this is a basic stream. So hopefully if you don't know anything about Eurorack, I will try to not skip things. Okay, so this is my controller. It's what lets me play notes. Right now it's set up that I can only play one note at a time. So it's monophonic. So I press one note, then I press a different note, it doesn't do anything. Actually, the interesting thing is how this is set up is the pitch will actually change. So it's reading the information of the last key I pressed. So if I press a low note down here and then press a subsequent high note, even though it doesn't re-trigger the sound, like it's still the same strum, but it will adjust the pitch that I'm going for. So you can do kind of fun things where you trigger a note and then mess with its pitch, which is a lot of fun. Right? So even though I'm limited to one note at a time, I can do some more interesting things with it because I can mess with the pitch while the one note is playing. This is often referred to as pitch modulation, and what a lot of people do is another way of handling it is, I don't know if you can see, but there's a little strip, the far end of the keyboard. It's over here. And if I press a key, I can move this strip up and down. On some keyboards, this will be like a little jog wheel that you rotate. And this is effectively doing the same thing. It's taking this note that I'm pressing, and it is changing pitch information that I'm sending to it. Okay, so that's a more continuous way of changing the pitch rather than doing the last key press, that trick that I was doing. So there's a few ways to make a single note more interesting without even getting to the fact that we have a whole Eurorack here to play with. So this is literally just some nice features on, say, a good controller that you can do some interesting things with. Okay, so what this is doing is it's sending voltage information up these three cables, which I'm holding back here, right over here. They're going up and they're feeding right into rings. And what I have it set up is the strum input voltage per octave, which basically says, the voltage tells you the note. And I'm modulating the brightness. Oh, hold on one second. Okay, I'm back. So I'm modulating the brightness. Now, on a module, you use lots of dials. They mean different things. In this case, the brightness is, I want to say how the higher harmonics are, their amplitude. So, for example, when you play a note like a guitar string, it's not just a single pure tone. So a pure tone would be like a tuning fork, which gives you a sine wave. So if I had an oscilloscope here, I would see here, let's do it for the camera. A sine wave. But a more interesting sound has many harmonics or many sine waves added together. And generally, the fundamental frequency will be the sine wave that matters most, while the other sine waves are flavoring it. Okay, however, if you change the brightness setting, I believe what this should do is make the higher frequency sine waves that are in this particular note be more present. You'll notice them more. Let's find out. Okay. Now, to prove that, I would need to grab an oscilloscope and actually figure out what the frequency spectrum is. But that's my my understanding of this knob. I might be wrong. So if I'm wrong, someone can correct me. Okay. So anyway, rings has a noise that comes out. It actually has two outputs right here. The odd and even, actually don't remember the definition of odd and even. I believe it has to do with the types of vibrations that a string can make, or a something that's vibrating. So this thing can imitate like a hi-hat, for example, if you want, or chimes. So those would be metal instruments that vibrate rather than a string. Anyway, you can pick the other set of vibrations, and it'll be a little different. Now, I'm not running stereo here. This is just a monophonic setup. So if I had stereo going, I'd probably put these in each channel. So if you had left and right headphones on, you'd hear a different sound in each ear. For right now, we're running monophonic, so that's okay. You'll hear this same sound in each ear. So you don't particularly need headphones for this. Okay. Let me just, all right. So the sound comes out of rings and heads into clouds, which is currently doing absolutely nothing. Comes out of clouds and heads into my mixer. This is the sound stage by wrong. which is a manufacturer of some pretty interesting modules. This is a nice Eurorack mixer because you get to select the panning and effectively the EQ of your input source. So left to right is if it's stereo, so left to right panning. And then up and down is higher frequencies, lower frequencies. So generally speaking, when you're mixing sounds together, you don't want to like have all your instruments overlapping the same frequency space. So, your drum should be low, and like your chimes or whatever, your melody will be like higher. So you can organize your sounds in accordance where they should be. But right now, I actually have that feature turned off. So it's just adding all the sounds together. And I have a second sound source coming in, which is coming from this module called Ears. Ears is a fun module. It's a contact microphone. So you can really hear when I'm touching this. In fact, it's so high in gain, I'm clipping. So there we go. It's almost like a little drum. You can do all kinds of stuff with this. Actually, this is a nice input module too, so you can feed it sound. Anyway, I have it kind of high on gain because I really want to get all the little clicks and rubbing sounds as you're touching the instrument. You get all this color. So when I plug and disconnect a cable, I think it sounds cool to be able to hear all the little bits. All right, so that's my setup. That's all that's happening. A total of basically 3 modules feeding into an interface that's off screen. So let's play with. So before I get to beads, let's go over a little bit what Clouds can do. So Clouds is a sampler granular synth. So what it does is it samples sound. So if I feed it this is a little bit easier to demonstrate if you put a microphone into this thing. So then you could like capture a couple words that you say and then play with those words. Here we can capture a note and then mess with the note in a few interesting ways. We call this granular synthesis because you seed the sound, you play audio that's pieces of whatever you're capturing. So if you have a sample, you chop the sample up into little bits, and then you play the individual bits in fun ways. So that allows you to use Clouds in a much more dynamic way than just a end of chain reverb, which is kind of the boring way of playing with it. So right now I have, there's 4 main settings on Clouds. There's the position of the audio sample that you're feeding in, which is this first slider. You can move up and down. Next time I'll try to get the camera so I can zoom in and show you guys a bit better. The second one is the density of the grains. So basically, how frequent will the grains be played? So it'll record a sample, and then it'll grab a snippet and play the snippet. How often will it do that? That will depend on the density knob. The size of the grain basically says how big is your snippet going to be? Is it like half the sample? Is it just going to be a little tiny, tiny piece of it, or anywhere in between? And then lastly is the texture of the sample, which is the last slider. This guy basically says, how do you want the grain to be cut off? It just have a slice where we say we play the sound on, off, or do we want to have like a smooth entry so the grain fades in, fades out? That's the texture of it. Okay. So what we're going to do is let's get a sequence going. So something nice and slow. Let's do something else. Okay, that's good. Has a nice little rhythm to it almost. Okay, so the sequence is going to play forever. It's just going to do its thing. So what we want to do is let's start messing with the sound a bit. Let's add some reverb. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I have the position, the density, I have all of these sliders down at the bottom. So basically what this setting is right now, this is actually how I usually start my patches with clouds. I have everything full tilt to the right. So this is all sliders down versus turning a knob all the way clockwise, which is how the original module works, because the sliders is specific to this clone. Okay, so I am reading the basically the beginning of the sample. I have the density maxed out. I have the size, I believe, as small as it can go. So it's just like a teeny tiny cut of the sound. And then the texture, I believe, is hard cut. So it's a tiny part and it's just chopped like with a knife. So let's see how that sounds. Let's start adding that in. Okay, so we're kind of using I'm trying to think of a good way to describe this. This is almost like using clouds like a very short delay. So we're playing bits of the incoming sound slightly delayed. We're playing a lot of them and fade out. We can add feedback and make it kind of sound a little. So the feedback knob basically says, do we want that grain to play again at the same volume? Do you want a feedback on itself? Basically, you're feeding the grain back into the input. Okay. So what I like to do is I like to use Monsoon for like a more interesting version of delay. So what we can do is let's make the texture smoother. That's a hard cut. And we're gonna make the size of the grain larger. So the piece of sound that's getting added is gonna be a bigger chunk of the original. There we go. Now I can take different pieces of that chunk. So now we're playing the end of the sample, I believe, if I have my orientation right. Let's go back to the beginning. So if we go full wet, we can hear only clouds and not the input sound. And you might be thinking, wait a second, this just sounds like the original sound. And you're right in a way. It's slightly modified because I'm not playing the whole piece. But essentially what we have set up here with this particular patch is we have the sample shifted down, so it's the delay. Let's go to 15%. Okay, I think that sounds lovely, so we'll leave it like that. Now, fun thing about clouds is you can freeze the sample. You can say, hey, don't throw away the sample you grabbed. Keep it. Let's do that. Let's grab a different piece. There we go. I'm going to go full wet, so now we're going to lose the input sound. It's going to go away. All right, so here what we're doing is we're listening to a grain that's kind of frozen in place. It's taking the same, we have a sample, we've chopped the sample down to a piece, and then we're just playing that same piece over and over again. Let's move up and down the buffer. So we're going up and down the sample that we took. Let's make the sample size shorter. Okay, so what's happening here is I've reduced the density of the grains. So now it's irregular. So basically it's playing at a specific rate. And it's playing the same piece over and over again. You can hear how choppy it is when I lower the texture. A little bit more smooth when the texture is smoothed out. Okay. While you can't clock Monsoon, you can sort of feed in a clock into it anyway. So right now I have, let's turn the density off. Okay, so now we're in 12 o'clock position at the center of the fader. And basically what that means is we're not playing anything. So the grains are not triggering. Okay. Right here, this cable, this purple one, is coming out of Pam's new workout. So Pam's is basically a really good clock. So I have a 120 BPM audio clock rate coming out, and I have an output that's double that, so 240 beats per minute. I'm going to feed that into the density of clouds or Monsoon. There we go. Let's move that. Let's pick a different little piece of that. Okay, so basically what we're doing is we're telling it to play the grains at 240 BPM. So you can, in a sense, clock this module by feeding it a source into the density. Let's grab a different piece. The fun thing is you can actually save these samples too. So you can have up to 4, I believe. you can record and actually keep the sample in the module. So when you turn things off at the end of the day and come back, you'll have it at the end. Okay. One second. All right, so let's feed back in some of the original sound. I'm going to pull the clock out now. Don't need it for now. Let's change the sequence we're feeding in. Okay, that sounds a little better. Cut out that like hiccup at the beginning. I want to get something a little different. let's do. I'm going to do a couple minor adjustments to this. See if I can. So I'm just looking for a nice, pleasant sound to bring us into when we bring beats in. So I just want to grab something that I like. And then we'll move into installing beads and seeing how that differs from monsoon and slash clouds. So a lot of modular is kind of this Zen garden thing where you spend a lot of time just experimenting. You're not, I mean, you can, but you're not necessarily working toward constructing a song. You're looking for sounds that you want to listen to. And you're seeing what combinations can get you something that sounds pleasant. So what I'm going to do is that sounds nice. A little too much there. Let's bring it down. Now, often what you want to do with the synthesizer is you want to take your sound and feed it into a filter so you can more control the frequencies a little bit better. I have a lot more modules than this. They're in this orange case here, which you can kind of see hanging off the side of the camera. This orange case, however, is not hooked up at the moment. So some of my more basic utilities are absent currently in this setup here. Okay, so here, my great fear is that I've spent 10 minutes just going back to the sound I started with at the beginning. I mean, it sounds good. It's a nice sound. It's one of the difficulties of rings is a lot of folks just go, oh, well, this, it's easy to find the first good sound it makes. It's more challenging to come up with more wild variations. So rings is really good to start with as a module because it sounds good out of the box. But the thing is many beginners, including I would still really include myself even after I've had this for a while, is it's hard to break out of the sort of default tone that rings can give you. It can do a lot more, but you have to kind of hunt for it. Here, let's just leave it in this mode. So, or is this where this mode is? Okay. So this is I believe the Carplus synthesis. Basically, it's taking a spike of sound and adding delay to it. Yeah, and giving it The nice thing about rings is there's several different modes on it. So like there's a kind of a chime sort of metal sound. There's sort of a strings, and then there's this car plus